neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. This is the word of the Lord.
All right. Well, should be real simple to understand this morning. Yeah. Oh, man. These last several weeks, we have been in Matthew chapter 5, and we have been in the Sermon on the Mount for a lot longer than that, but these last several weeks, we've been looking at these case studies that Jesus gives here, these 6 case studies that Jesus gives here. And today we are concluding this section of Matthew chapter 5. And I feel like a little hot. So we will be concluding this section of Matthew chapter 5. And so this is, we'll get to it. What we've been learning is that we've been learning about Jesus' yoke. Okay, his set of teaching, his way of interpreting, of reading the scriptures. This was a physical, the yoke was a physical object that was placed on cattle that would drive them and guide them. And so when a rabbi talks of his yoke, he's talking about his set of teaching, his way that the scriptures should govern and guide your life. And Jesus has been talking about his yoke here, and primarily using these 6 case studies to show you how he reads and interprets Scripture. Remember, these are not to abolish the law. They're not to abolish the Torah, but rather to fulfill it or to bring it to its fullness, to bring it to its intended goal or its intended purpose, okay? And so we've been looking at these case studies. Save talked about case study 5 last week, and we're going to talk about the last one, the 6th and final one this week. And primarily what Jesus has, what we're primarily learning is that Jesus' view of the Scriptures is primarily focused on our deepest and inwardest parts of us, right? I think it was Sabe that kind of coined the phrase, like the caves of our heart, right? The deep down places. And I think what Jesus is getting at here is that Torah was not just given as merely for to manage your external behavior, right? Torah's intended purpose, intended goal, was so that you would flourish into becoming something, that you'd be shaped into a kind of person, a type of person. And so the command to not murder wasn't just about not killing people that anger you, right? The command to not murder was meant to shape you and mold you into becoming the type of person that doesn't view others with contempt, right? That doesn't devalue others. The command to not commit adultery wasn't just about not sleeping around, right? No, the command was so that you would be molded and formed into a person who doesn't view others as property or possessions that you can control and objectify with lust in your heart, right? And so each of these case studies, like he enters into a specific debate about divorce, and the specific debate is like, well, you're just divorcing, you're entering these covenants flippantly, right? And like you're just discarding them like they're nothing. Like that's not the intent of marriage. That's not the intent that the law was making that connection for. He talks about oaths and how really what the hand here is the duplicity and the lack of integrity in your heart. And last week we talked about retaliation, and this week we're talking about enemy love. And so the question that Jesus is pressing in is not how are you behaving? The question Jesus is asking us is who are you becoming? What kind of person are you becoming? Because remember, this is all connected to salt and light, right? You're going to be salt and light, you're going to be a disciple, you're going to be a kingdom people. Are you becoming that? Are you being shaped and molded by that? These final two case studies of retaliation, which Save covered last week, and enemy love that we're going to look at this week are deeply connected. In fact, if you were to flip over to Luke's account of the sermon in Luke chapter 6, I'm not going to ask you to do that, but Luke chapter 6, he actually merges these two case studies as one, and it just kind of flows as a natural movement. Matthew has them as two separate movements. That's kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but the point is that these two things go hand in hand. They are deeply tied to one another. And to be honest, these are really hard sayings. These are probably among some of the most controversial words that Jesus spoke in his culture. And I would go to say that they are still some of the most challenging and counterintuitive things that he speaks into our culture today. This area of non-retaliation and enemy love. And so I don't want to brush past the sensitivity of these words or the difficulty of these words. But I do believe that these words have, they just have the ability to ruin us in the most beautiful way possible. And I really think this is what, this whole thing, the following Jesus thing, is all about. If we could get what Jesus is communicating here. Jesus is not just giving us rules to follow. He is shaping a brand new way of seeing, of vision, of how we view people and how we treat people as humans. Even the humans who we don't like, we disagree with, even the humans that would label us as an enemy and we would label as an enemy as well. And while what Jesus says here certainly has some roots in the Torah and the Hebrew scriptures and even in the Psalmic language, no one quite centers it, embodies it, and lives it like Jesus does here. I don't think anybody had ever said anything like what Jesus is saying here until Jesus says it. And I don't think you can find any person after Jesus that says anything like this that is not just echoing the words of Jesus. And so we're going to stand before these words, and we're going to recognize that they're challenging, and we're going to recognize that they are beautiful. But we also are going to recognize that they're powerful words. These words have the power to transform us. Something about it has the power to heal communities and show what the kingdom of heaven is all about, and how the kingdom people of heaven should live in the present earth, right? So, all right, let's rock and roll. Jesus has been forming a people, right? He's been forming this group of people And the whole goal, right, in verse 20, he says, like, you've got to have your righteousness surpass that of the Pharisees and scribes. Remember that? And it's like, we look at that like, well, that's impossible. And what we're talking about is how, like, the scribes and Pharisees, there's something about their righteousness that's not righteous enough. Right? It's not quite good enough. And so Jesus is trying to form you into understanding it's not just about behavior, it's about who you are becoming. And maybe we can just say it this way, like Jesus wants you to not just not just know the Torah, but to understand what the Torah was meant to be, meant to accomplish. And man, I thought Savi did a great job last week talking about verses 38 through 41 about that TV is not working, so I'm going to be doing a lot of this, unfortunately. Of non-retaliation. And specifically, if you'd missed the sermon or if you've forgotten the sermon, man, I've been there. Go back, listen to it. It's on YouTube or podcast or whatever. I don't know exactly where it's at. I listen to it on podcast. So, but it's there. And I thought specifically what Save wanted you to capture last week was that Jesus does not ask us to do anything that he himself did not willingly do, right? Like Jesus, when the guards came in the garden and his disciples got up and pulled their two swords to fight, Jesus rebuked them. And he goes like, no, that's not how we're going to win. Take my hand. Like he even takes his hand out of the cuff to put the guy's ear back on from Peter that slid it off and then put his hand back in the cuff. Like it's just amazing. And then he's led and he's beaten and he's stripped and he's left naked and then he's killed on a cross and he's led as a sheep to a slaughter, right? And so like Jesus is not asking us to do anything that he himself was not willing to do himself, okay? But because these things are so connected, I want to look at these verses again. I want you to catch what Jesus is saying here to his people, and I want us to kind of feel the response of that, right? So look at verse number 43. So we're going back to get to where we want to be today, all right? So sorry about that. By the way, I'm not known to be concise, so sorry, all right? But we will get to lunch, and I am aware, well, the clocks doesn't work, so I'm not actually aware of the time. I am now, okay? All right, verse 43. Ye have heard that it hath been said. Verse 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if a man will sue thee at thy law, and take away thy coat, let him also have thy cloak also. We'll talk about that verse in a second. Verse 41, and whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, from him that would borrow of thee, turn thou not away. So specifically, what he is saying, the intended goal of the eye for eye command, was that you would not resist the evil. So do not resist evil. Okay, well this word that he's using here, do not resist evil, is the word antithesis. And it's actually the whole phrase. So it's not just the word resist, it's ye resist not. Okay, that ye resist not is all of this word. And it carries the idea that it's really hard to put into like English. And so I think that's why it gets translated as resist not the evil or resist not an evil person. But the idea is that you are to oppose them in an unlike manner to how you are being opposed. Right? I think maybe the best way to understand what Jesus was saying is to look at how Paul understood what Jesus was saying. So on two different occasions, Paul references the Sermon on the Mount. More than two different occasions, but on two different occasions he references this specific section on the Sermon on the Mount. In 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 15, he tells the church at Thessalonica, see that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourself and to all men. So you see how Paul seems to understand, like you are not to be paying out evil for evil to anyone, but you are to follow what's good. In Romans, he specifically is like riffing off of the Sermon on the Mount, right? You can hear this language. Bless them that persecute you. Bless and curse not. A few verses later, he says, recompense to no man evil for evil, right? So it's this idea that when evil is done unto you, when evil is brought against you, you are not to oppose that evil with evil. You are not to respond in kind. You are to resist not in kind, right? And then Jesus, like, because he seems to know, like, I know this can be, confusing, he gives 3 examples of what he's talking about. And these examples are not like imaginative hypotheticals he's just coming up with for sermon illustration. Like, these are day-to-day realities for the people of Galilee who live under the oppression of Rome. So these situations are like scenes that happen to them, right? Okay, so like, put yourself in their sandals. You are a fisher person, right? And you've caught a lot of fish today, and you're like, man, this is good. This is going to feed my family. I'm going to be able to sell some of this fish to my neighbors who need it. Like, this is good. We're going to eat tonight. And you got your net, and you've cleaned them up, and you've got it. But in order to go back home, you've got to pass through the tax collection stand, because that's how it works in Rome. You're not fishing on your land. This is Rome's land. You've got to pay the tax for the fish you just took out of our sea. And so, you have money for tax, but you don't have quite enough money for the tax. And so you're going to have to probably dump some fish. That's pretty customary, that you're going to have to dump some fish. And so, but you are looking at your catch and you're realizing, like, it's not that great. Like, it was a good catch. It was a better day than we had yesterday, but like, it's not enough to feed everybody. And so you don't want to dump the fish. And so you think, well, maybe the tax collector, who's a Jewish guy, right? Like, maybe he'll see me as a fellow Jew and will have some sort of compassion, some sort of mercy, and he'll be lenient, and he'll just put it on my tab, right? And I can pay back the tax at a different time, and I can rack up sort of like a bill. And so you get up to the booth, and the fish are counted, and the tax is given, and the amount is said, and you say, hey, I've got this much, I don't have it all, is there any way you could be lenient? And the tax collector throws his books down, and he says, that's the tax! And he gets up and he strikes you on your right cheek, right? Okay, so hang on, picture it, because in a right-handed predominantly culture, if you're going to hit someone on your right cheek, Savi, I'm going to use her for an illustration here. I'm not going to actually hit you. But if you're going to hit someone on your right cheek, if I'm going to hit Savi on his right cheek, I can't hit him like this. I got to hit him like, no, that's not how you, so it's describing a backhanded slap. This is not about like a fist fight. This is about an act of humiliation, an act of devalue, an act of degradation, like you are beneath me. This is an insult, if anything. And so you're a follower of Jesus. You want to follow the way of Jesus. You want to be salt and light in the earth. Jesus, how do I respond to that? What do I do when that happens? Let's say you're a poor person in Galilee, and you are striving to make it for your family, and you think of an idea, a business. No one's ever done this before, but you need money for startup costs, and you don't have any money. And so you go to the local Jew that has given out money, and you say, hey, is there any way you could loan me money? I got this deal, and I will pay you back. I promise tenfold. And the guy's like, all right, yeah, sure, I've done deals like these before, but what do you have for collateral? Like, if you default, what's going to happen here? And so very common practice, they would use their own clothing as collateral, right? And what's being described here in this case, like he's sued you for your coat. It's a little bit of a weird, the word's actually your tunic, okay? So he's suing you for your undergarment, that is your clothes. Like, he's taking you to court, and the idea here is that, like, this guy has given you the deal only to take everything he can from you, right? Like, it is like this greediness that is being exposed here. And you're in a court of law, like, the evidence is clear. You signed your clothes over as collateral. You've got to pay this guy back. He's demanding payment. And so, like, you are forced. Now, he can't take your coat, because that is your garment of warmth. That is, in case you don't have a home, your shelter. So he can't take that. That's not legally on the table. But he can take everything but that. And so he's taken that, and now you're going to be left with absolutely nothing. No, you don't even have anything to put down on collateral to try to get back up. And it's like, okay, I'm a follower of Jesus. I want to be salt and light in this earth. What is my response to that? Like, if that happens, when that happens, how is that person to respond if they want to be a follower of Jesus? And then the third scene, he's, okay, so It's Sabbath, and you're at the Sea of Galilee, and you've got your family, and they're playing in the sand, and they're having fun, making castles or whatever. It's funny, because if you go to the Sea of Galilee, there's not much sand, but you get the point. And you're there, and your wife has made all the food from yesterday, and she's brought it out in the picnic, and you're going to have this family Sabbath, and you're like resting and relaxing, and all of a sudden, as you're about to break bread, 2 Roman soldiers who have been patrolling the sea start coming near you. And these guys mean trouble, man. Like, these guys are going to they're going to take your kneecaps. This is not good. And they come, and they drop their bags down, and they pull their sword. And I love that it says that they compel you. Okay, the word is forced. Okay, the word is actually angarius. It's a Greek term. Angarius was actually a Roman law that meant that a Roman soldier could siege any of your property, including yourself, to use for his benefit for a certain amount of time. So he could use your cow, he could use your cattle, he could use your carts, and in this case he's using a person to carry his bags, and the law had some limits. He could only make him go a mile. Okay, well, it's the Sabbath. I'm not supposed to work on the Sabbath. Like, okay, that excuse doesn't work with the Roman, right? Yeah. So like, what do you do? I'm a follower of Jesus, like, what do I do? And I think the danger is that sometimes we can hear these words of Jesus, and we can almost imply that they are just sort of passive. That we're just, well, as a follower of Jesus, you have to resist not the evil that's being done to you, so you just kind of have to let it happen. I call it doormat theology, right? Like, you just let them walk all over you. That's what you have to do. But hang on a second. Because you can read the responses that Jesus gives. Turn the other cheek. Give them your shirt also. Or give them your coat also. Go a second mile. Like, that's not doing nothing. That's not just letting them walk all over you. That is most certainly, you are certainly doing something in those cases. But what is it? It's not the fight or flight mentality that, if you're going to get back in a slap, there's 2 ways typically you're going to respond, right? Some of us are going to respond in cowardness and like, oh wow, that was humiliating. I'm sorry I asked. Like, just take the fish. Here's my tax. I'm going. Or you're going to get up and start swinging, right? Right? Like, if someone sues me for everything I got, I'm countersuing, right? Taking everything, right? Like, this is the fight or flight mentality that most of us have. But that's not what Jesus is saying. So it's not that. It's not retaliation. It's not swinging a fist. But it's like this sort of like creative, yet non-violent, some sort of like premeditated, creative resisting that is not resisting. It's calling out evil without mirroring the evil, right? So like Jesus says, someone backhand slams you, what do I do? Jesus is like, well, you get up and you're like, whoa, Mr. Tax Collector, you've had a rough day. Like, clearly I'm not the first person that asked you for leniency, and I am so sorry. Like, you're right, it probably doesn't feel good to be cheated. And so like, you got to get something off your chest if you need to get more out. Don't backhand slap the next, like, go ahead. Like, what is that? Who responds that way? Like, what fuels that kind of a response? Right? And what does that do ultimately? Well, all of a sudden it's disruptive. It's disruptive to the whole scene that's just taken place. Because like, what is the tax collector expecting you to do when he backhands? Well, he's expecting you to cower and give up. He's expecting you to flee without pain so he can send his Roman soldiers to go get you. Or he's expecting you to swing a punch so that he can go, whoa, and they can take him, right? But if you stand up and you act like the insult didn't even happen, and you're like, yeah, I get it. I'm a dumb Jew, just hit me. Well, like all of a sudden, like now, it's flipped back on him. Like, what's he gonna, is he actually gonna hit you again? Are you really gonna hit this guy again? Like the Roman soldiers gotta be like, we're gonna do there, right? Like you're in court, someone sues you for everything you've got, and in the middle of the court, you're like, you know what? Man, I didn't realize you were that short on cash when I asked for like, wow, if you need my garment, like you probably need this coat more than I do. So just take it. Well, like, what does that leave you with? Yeah, see, it's not just about turning the other cheek. It's actually about turning the other cheeks, right? Like, think about that. Like, now you're naked in court. And what does that do? Like, that exposes, that's disruptive to the system, right? Yeah. And what does that do? Well, like the guy that's suing you, well, all of a sudden he's awake. Yeah, nakedness has a tend to wake people up, right? Like, whoa. And his consciousness is now alerted to like, what is this? Like, who's willing to stand there naked in court? And now everyone's sitting there like, are you really going to leave this guy naked? The response now flips back to the individual. It's off of this person and back onto them. Hey, carry my bags. Oh, it's Sabbath. I'm not. No. I'd be honored. Hey, yeah, you've been working all day. Your arms. I've been resting. Like, hey, let me take this bag. And you take it and you go with him and you just go right past the 1 mile. Like, he commands another guy to take the bag the next mile, and you're like, no, sir. Let me just go all the way to the doorstep. Would you give me the honor of taking this all the way to your door? And now all of a sudden, like, again, this is disruptive. It flips the power dynamic. Who's actually in control? Who's actually making the decision? Like, am I forcing this guy to do that, or is he willingly, like, doing this? And again, like, the question becomes like, well, who responds this way? Like, what is that response? It's not retaliation. It's not fighting. It's not fleeing. It's not freezing. Well, Jesus is going to call it love. It's love. And the word in his culture he uses is the word agape. That is agape. And so he then goes into the verses we're looking at today. And he says, like, this is what you should do. Give to this person that ask of you. Do this, do that. Act in love. And he says this, because you have heard it said, right? Like, this is the next verse. Ye have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Okay, this is the 6th time Jesus has pulled this move. Ye have heard it said, right? And every other time he's done it, he is quoting from, I thought we'd learned something over the last several weeks, but he's quoting from the Old Testament, or the Torah, okay? And so what is he quoting? Where is he quoting? Well, this should be, I don't know if it's familiar as a verse, but we know this is from the Old Testament because Jesus loves this verse. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. He tells us that this is what the whole law hinges on, these commands, right? This is like what it's all about. And so he's quoting from Leviticus 19, chapter number 18. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. Okay, well, hang on a second, because that's not what Jesus says, right? I mean, it's some of what he says, but what's missing from this verse? Yeah, hate thine enemy, right? He says, you've heard it said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But Leviticus 19:18 doesn't say anything about hating an enemy. And by the way, you can search up and down the scriptures. You will never find anything that says in the Old Testament that you are to hate your enemies. Never once is it commanded that you are to hate your enemies. I know some Bibles are going to cross-reference to Deuteronomy chapter 24, but that is not verbatim hate your enemy. That is an interpretation of what Deuteronomy 24 is saying. And what ultimately Jesus is doing here in this final case study is, again, entering into one of those debates. Just like he did with divorce, he's choosing to enter into a debate about an interpretation that centers around Leviticus chapter 19. Love thine neighbor as thyself. There was an interpretation of this passage that said that this excludes your enemy, and in fact, actually encourages you, or that the Torah in whole would encourage you to hate your enemy. And it's like, well, okay, but where exactly does that interpretation come from? Where do we get that? Well, this is the Essene community in Qumran. For centuries, no one knew where this hate your enemy thing came from. We tried to make up a whole bunch of things, which is why there's a bunch of cross-references to like passages in the Old Testament where it kind of, sort of, maybe. The whole point is the Essene community was found much later. After Israel became a nation again in 1948, they discovered this community right by the Dead Sea. And this was a community of people called the Essenes. Josephus mentioned the Essenes. Other historians mentioned the Essenes, but nobody had any like concrete details of them. That many people believe that they were just nomadic and lived very quiet lives. And this is all being confirmed as we study more about them. But the biggest thing about the Essene community at Qumran is that not far from it, in the caves up in these mountains, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we find our most recent verification of certain older manuscripts and the most reliable texts that we had of the day, a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls confirm those things. But what we also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls is other writings from their time, and specifically a handbook on being part of the Essene community. And in the handbook, they refer to themselves as the sons of light. And in the handbook, they say that you are to hate all the sons of darkness. And later it says that the wise ones are to hold eternal hatred toward the people of the pit. All right? Very poetic. Okay, so what is going on here? Well, they're saying, based on their understanding, if you're going to be an Essene, if you're going to be a part of this community at Qumran, you've got to love your neighbor, love the sons of light, but you got to hate your enemy. You got to hate your neighbor. You got to hate your adversary. Now, we don't know if Jesus is specifically quoting from the Essenes or anything like that, but he certainly is entering into this interpretation of Leviticus chapter 19. So what I want to do just for the next 2 minutes or so is bring you into the debate, okay? Because a lot of us look at this and like, who would ever say that you're to hate your enemy? Okay, well, hang on. Leviticus 19, right? Here's the context of Leviticus chapter 19, all right? Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the persons of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. But in righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor. Okay, so what I've brought here, this is all of the verses in Leviticus chapter 19 that deal with this word neighbor. Okay, so we're going to try to define, because this is the big question, right? Like, are enemies considered neighbors? Like, that's the question. Like, I know we're to love our neighbor, but who is a neighbor? Right? That's the question. That's the conversation. That's the debate. So here's Leviticus 19's take on what your neighbor is, okay? Nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness thou shalt judge thy neighbor. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. So who in Leviticus chapter 19 qualifies as a neighbor in the context? Well, I'm going to highlight all of the things, okay? So a person of the poor, a person of the mighty, among thy people, thy brother. Here's a big clue. Children of thy people. So who's he talking about? And in Leviticus chapter 19, who's the neighbor? The Jew. Yeah, the other Israelite people. Like at face value, this is making it clear that inner Israelite relationships are what is the focus of Leviticus chapter 19. Okay, so now you're probably swinging the other way of the debate. Well, like, okay, yeah, well, clearly it's not the tax collector that's the traitor. That's not an actual Jew. Like, he's defaulted to the Roman. Like, a Roman's not an outside. Like, a Roman's not a neighbor. He's not among your people. So, I guess you don't have to love those people. Well, hang on, because then here comes the other side of the debate. Well, a few paragraphs later in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 33 through 34, it says this, that if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, ye shall not vex him, but the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay, so now it's like, oh, well, now the command to love them as yourself is now given also to the stranger that sojourns with you. So, I guess you do have to love the foreigner, and you do have to love the Roman. Well, but again, the Roman is not like sojourning with the people. Like, this is given as like other people flee to you as a safe haven, as a refuge, and then they are living amongst you now. Treat them, don't treat them less than, right? This is not an oppressor. This is not a traitor that is actively oppressing you, right? Right? Like, again, we're just kind of entering the debate of what people are talking about. And then other people are going to be like, well, okay, like, I know, yes, Leviticus 19, but we got to take the whole Torah into context. And so Deuteronomy chapter 4 talks about how we've got to remove these people that are inhabiting the land. And Joshua, we do move those people that inhabit the land. Judges, they continue to be our adversaries, and God has to raise up people, but that's not really what the book of Judges is about. So again, giving you these debates that are going on. And ultimately it came to their King David, who in Psalm 139 in a prayer says, do not I hate them, O Lord, who hate you? And am not I grieved with those that rise up against thee? I hate them with a perfect hatred. I count them mine enemies. But if you look at the whole context of Psalms 139 and go look at the context in which David is writing that psalm, he is very specifically talking about his enemies that are enemies to him. And he is saying, like, well, any enemy of mine is an enemy of God, and so I have the right to hate. So again, add in that from the words of Moses and David to the words of Jesus in Galilee, the people of Israel have been under non-Jewish empire that are violent and oppressive for nearly 600 years. Like, folks, that's over twice the history of the United States of America, okay? Like, these people have lived under bondage and oppression and violent bondage and violent oppression. And so you can kind of see how the love your neighbor command became, yeah, but that doesn't include the people who hate us and the people who we hate. Well, what does Jesus say about the debate? Remember, regardless of what you think of the debate, you're a follower of Jesus today, and so you don't get to decide who has the authority, right? Like, Jesus has the authority. So how he interprets this passage is how we got to interpret the passage. How he reads it is how we have to read it. So how does Jesus answer the question of who constitutes as a neighbor? Well, he's going to answer that question specifically well, I don't know if specifically is the right answer, but he's going to answer the specific question of who is my neighbor in Luke chapter 10 with a story, is he not? A now famous story. But we're not talking about Luke chapter 10. We're talking about Matthew chapter 5. And in Matthew chapter 5, on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus makes his definition pretty crystal clear. Because he says in the next verse, but I say, love your enemies. Bless them that curse thee. Do good to them that hate thee. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. In the words of Andrew DeCord, he says, Jesus takes the ultimate other, the one we feel the most justified to hate, and he asks us to recalibrate our ethical vision. The enemy is to be seen and treated exactly as thy neighbor. Wow. That's tough. And why are we to do this, Jesus? That ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. So Jesus says ultimately the reason that you are to love your enemy and that you are to love the other and that you are to pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you and do good to them that hate you and bless them that despise you. Like the reason Jesus is saying that is that love is not based, it's not decided based on someone's proximity to you nor their ethnicity to you. No, you do good to them which hate you is based on the desire to be a reflection of the Father. You want to be like your Father? You want to be salt and light in this earth? You've got to do what your Father would do. Now, I don't think what he's saying here is that like this is God's condition of accepting you or adopting you or becoming a son. What he is saying is like if you want to be salt and light, if you want to have righteousness that surpasses that of the Pharisees, well, like the ultimate goal here is that you would be like your Father, that you would resemble the family of God, that you'd become a reflection of the Father. And then to solidify the point, Jesus in the same verse says, "For that you may be children of the Father which is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sendeth rain on the just and the unjust." I love this. Jesus goes, "Have you considered the weather?" Right? Like he's laying down some heavy things. He's like, love your enemies. Pray for them that despitefully use you. Do good to them that hate you, that you might look like the Father up in heaven. And what a lovely day we're having. Like, who talks like that? Who does it? Like, this is the most Jesus move ever, right? And by the way, it's so indicate that Jesus was steeped in wisdom literature and the Psalms. Like, he was rooted in this. Like, in the Proverbs all the time, it's like, what do I do if I'm lazy? Well, go to the ant, right? Like, Dallas Willard calls this a God-saturated lens. That everything Jesus saw, he viewed through, like, how God created it and saw it and made it, and probably because he was God. Okay, anyway, so, like, but he views this of, like, and he's like, what a love. Like, this is such the thing. Like, the debate is raging. Who do we love? Who's the neighbor? The enemy's not the neighbor. And Jesus is like, but have you looked at the weather forecast? Because this is what I've noticed about life. That I can drive past a farmer's field, and I can see that it is lush with the most beautiful vine trees and the most beautiful orchids. And I can see that favor is clearly upon his hand at work. And yet, that doesn't tell me that he's this great, outstanding character. That doesn't tell me how he treats his family. That doesn't really tell me if he's a God-fearer or not. And I can drive by someone's field who, man, they got nothing, and it looks like, dude, whatever happened? What happened to your field? And yet that's not an indication that they hate God or that they don't, like, I can see that same farmer in synagogue with me every day. Like, there's a whole book in the Old Testament called Job, right? About this kind of thing. It's Job. But like, there's a whole book that this theology is bad. Like that theology of like, well, God blesses those that are good and God diminishes those that are not good. Like that whole theology is like, it doesn't work. And Jesus is like, listen, the same sun rises on the good and the bad. The same rain falls and blesses your crops, whether you are righteous or not righteous. And by the way, like in their world, this is like the view. Like all the other nations are like, yeah, we gotta bless these gods and we gotta give our offerings because we need more rain. And if we don't do that, we don't get enough rain. And yet Jesus steps in and is like, no, I said, that's not what God's like at all. God gives rain the same. God doesn't have separate suns for good people and bad people, right? There is one sun up in the sky. There is one rain cloud that falls. And like this is like Jesus is saying like, so like the condition for your love is that you'd look like your Father. And what a lovely day we're having. Jesus is arguing that love is not grounded in the worthiness of the individual, but it is grounded in the desire to be a reflection of the character of the Father. And where does he get that? Well, it's not just from the Son. He has some scriptural basis too, because he says in Proverbs 25, the Bible says, if thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. If your enemy's hungry, you don't pray for his demise. You don't pray, oh, I hope he stays hungry. This is going to weaken him. Now's our chance to attack. No, the Bible says you go out, you say, hey, I had some extra bread. Like, this is wisdom, right? That's what the book of Proverbs is. Here's the Torah itself. And Jesus is thinking about all this. He's like, well, in Exodus 23, it kind of says that if thou meet thy enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt, that's a donkey, going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. If thou seest the ass of him that hateth thee lieth under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help him. In other words, like you see a guy whose life is tangled up, he's having a bad day, his donkey's running away. You're not like, well, look whose donkey's having a bad day, huh? You get what you deserve, buddy. No. The Bible says you help him. You go round up the cattle. You bring it back. You feed them. You give them water. You shine as sun. You shine as rain. You do what the Father would do. Like Jesus sees the mercy of God embedded in the Torah, sung in the Psalms, echoed in wisdom literature, and displayed every morning in the sun that rises up in Galilee. And he's telling his disciples, you see what God is doing? Go do that. Go be like that. Go live as a reflection of your Father. Love thine enemies. And again, this is the hardest thing we'll ever do, but part of the reason it's the hardest thing we ever do is that we just don't quite understand love. And that's not a Bible problem, that is an English language problem, okay? Jesus is talking about agape love. Agape love. Like, I am convinced that the word love, like, this is a little bit of a, like, thing with me, so sorry. But, like, it's the most unclear, unhelpful word in our language. It is. Like, I love Marvel Comics. I do. Love them to death. I hold deep appreciation for them. I have a sentimental value probably from my childhood. I love Marvel Comics. I do. I love authentic tacos, like Mexican authentic tacos, carne asada, corn tortilla, a little bit of cabbage maybe, and some sauce. Like, that's all you need. I love them. But what I mean by that is that, like, I prefer them to other food, right? I prefer them to other tacos. I definitely prefer them to Tex-Mex, right? Yeah, like, I prefer them. I like them. I love my family. I love my wife. I love my kids. But that is about bond, and that is about affection, and that is about loyalty, right? So like, do I love my wife like I love Spider-Man? Like, well, of course not. Like, I hope not, right? Like, of course not. But yet I say the same word. I use the same word to talk about all. So why not just have three different? Okay, well, anyways, here you go. So in English, love primarily is talking about a feeling. It's an emotion. It's something that happens to you and bubbles up inside of you. Well, can you see how that is fundamentally different than what Jesus is asking you to do? He's not asking you, like, Jesus, are you saying I got to have warm, fuzzy feelings about the guy that just backhanded me? Like, are you saying I got to have warm, fuzzy feelings about these people that are my oppositions, these business partners that went bad? Like, are you saying I've got to be good? Like, are you saying I gotta like have these warm, happy emotions towards them? No, like, that's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is using this word agape here. Now, he's actually using the word agapeo, which means to love. It's an active love. It's an action. It's a verb, not a noun. It's an action, not a feeling. Agape is love as a chosen posture and embodied action. So notice how he pairs love with to bless and to do good and to pray. Well, these are actions. Later, he talks about the Father that maketh the sun to rise, or that sendeth the rain. Like, these are actions. These are things that God does. He then says, and when he talks about the Gentiles do that, the Pharisee does that, the tax collector does that. He talks about how if you salute them, or if you greet them, if you are generous to them, like that's what they do. And he's saying, like, these are action loves. These are love in action. These are the love actions. And this love extends beyond just not retaliating, right? This is going the step further. This is the not fleeing, the not fighting. This is the standing with your cheek exposed. This is the standing and going the second mile. And what Jesus is saying is here, it's not just that I want you to refrain from revenge or from retaliation, but I want you to take a positive action toward them. Right? Now note what he says, and again, I'm not concise. Again, watch this. He says, for if ye love them, verse 46. Do I have that verse? Verse 46. If you love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans do the same? I think Save talked about this a different week, where he's like unkingdom people can look good, can be generous, can love people. That's what Jesus is saying here. He's like, do not the tax collectors love other tax collectors? Like, he goes on to say, if you greet your brethren, or if you salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans, or do not even the word there is actually like the Gentiles or the non-Jews do that? Like, Jesus is saying, like, honestly, humans inside of their circles, like, they're pretty decent people. Like, you got to be a pretty despicable person to not love your family. You got to be a pretty despicable person to not have hospitality towards, like, the people who are closest to you and who are in your thought communities, right? Like, it's pretty easy to love people within our circle, within our tribe. But if your love never crosses the boundary of your own circle, then what exactly makes that kingdom love? How is that love? How is that biblical love? Everybody loves the people who loves them. Everybody greets the people who greets them. Everybody is generous to the people who are already generous to them. The tax collectors do that. The Gentiles do that. Middle school lunch tables do that, right? But the Jesus is saying here is like, okay, but where does your love stop? That's like what I really want to press you on. Where does your love stop? What is distinctive about that kind of love that just loves those that love you? What's holy about that kind of love that just loves people that love that? Does your love stop at any point? Where does your love hit a wall? Where does your mercy run out? Where does your generosity close? Where is it that you stop praying? And the way of the kingdom is to become the kind of person who can look at the ones outside of the circle even the ones who are in opposition of my circle, and say, well, they might be outside of me, but they are not outside of the Father's reach. And they are not outside of the Father's mercy. And so therefore they cannot be outside of my love and my prayer and my generosity and my doing good. Jesus is desiring to form a people whose love looks like the Father. And that is exactly why he closes it with this line. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father, which is in heaven, is perfect. And again, we're like, oh, great. Can't do this. Okay, well, hang on. This word perfect, and we'll talk about this word perfect more here in a second, but it's the word teleos, and it doesn't quite mean perfection like 100% on all of your tests. It's not like quite like a 5.0 GPA that like exceeds and is above. Okay, so we'll get to that. But Jesus is calling back again to Leviticus chapter 19, actually. And he's talking about verse number 2. So he says, ye shall be holy, for the Lord your God am holy, right? For I, the Lord your God, am holy. Well, so this is the word holy. This is the word kadesh. It's not the same word, not in the Septuagint, not anywhere. It's a different word, be holy. In Luke, chapter number 6, remember I told you this is a parallel teaching that Luke has. Luke actually concludes the section by saying, be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. So I don't really think the idea here anyways is that you be perfect or that you be holy or that you be merciful for the sake of being perfectly merciful or perfect. No, the idea here is that you become a reflection of the Father. That is ultimately why Jesus is ending this, right? Phrased this way. That if you're going to be salt and light, you've got to be a reflection of the Father. If you're going to love people, you've got to be a reflection of the Father. Now the word perfect is the word teleos, and it's found all over Scripture in many different forms. And it most oftentimes carries this idea of maturity or whole, complete, fully realized. It's a similar, like it's a synonym to the word Jesus uses when he says, I've come to fulfill the law. Now, it's not the same word, but it's a synonym word to that, of like, I've come to make it what it was supposed to be, right? It's like a maturing, a completion. John 19:30, Jesus says, it is finished. It's the word tetelestai, right? Comes from this same root, teleos. So it's finished, it's complete. Okay, so it carries this idea of like maturity. And so like, again, Jesus is concluding the whole section, like his whole teaching, these case studies. And he's saying, he's alluding back, right? And he's saying, listen, like the Father doesn't hold, like this is why I want you to do this, because the Father doesn't hold his creation in contempt. That the Father doesn't view people like objectifyingly. That the Father, like his word, his yea is yea, his nay is nay. Like the Father's words are whole, they're complete, right? And in the immediate context, what's he talking about? In the immediate context, he's talking about like the Father doesn't love impartially. The Father loves impartially. The Father does not love partially. He does not, his sun rises, same sun rises. Like the Father's love is complete. The Father's love is whole on everyone. It's complete love. And here Jesus is saying that these teachings on this mountainside, they are meant to shape you to become like the Father, and specifically like that. Someone who's whole. Someone who is complete, someone who has integrity, someone who values covenants and the marriage covenant of how God created you, someone who values people as people, who does not hold them in contempt. God wants you to love people like he loves people. This is what it was always about. It's what God has always been after. God has always desired that his creation would bear his image and reflect his image to the creation. That's been the whole point. Now, again, if you're like, yeah, it's impossible. Hey, I know it is. And that's why Paul says in Romans chapter 10, for Christ is the end, the teleos, of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. Paul says, yeah, Christ, he was the teleos. He's not doing away with the law. He's not like the end, like the law, and that didn't matter. No, he is what the law was always about. Jesus is the fulfillment of the thing. He is the perfect teleos. He is the teleos human who did it on our behalf. And he invites us into practicing the way of Jesus in an abiding relationship with him that would mirror the Christ-like life to those around you. Now again, we're like, well, Eric, I'll try. I'll give it my best shot, but man, you don't know my coworker. And I'm no Jesus, right? Like, I've said that before. I'm no Jesus, right? Yeah, we all have. But hang on, because I want you to see this. This is not just a command. This is a promise. This is a promise. Jesus says that when you become a disciple, and Jesus becomes your king, and you yield your life to him, and you recognize he does for you what you cannot, and he's the teleos you were meant to be but can never be. Well, he now abides with you, and his Spirit comes to equip and fill you. And it's the Spirit, it's the same Spirit that rose Jesus from the dead, now lives in you. And it's that Spirit that then molds you and shapes you to go do the Jesus-life things. So it's this promise that this is what you are meant to be. You see, there is something about when a human being is equipped of the Holy Spirit and he intentionally chooses to step over some tribal line, some barrier, some across into enemy territory. And he performs an act of biblical love, of concrete generosity and kindness to someone who hates you and who you don't like either, right? But he decides that he's going to go against the grain of every human intuition that he has that seems natural. And he's going to look with compassion and he's going to perform an act of generosity like the Father shows his generosity. Jesus says that when you do that, you are never more like God. And then in that moment, there is something about when we as disciples of Jesus respond with the action of biblical love, that it is participating in the very heartbeat of Jesus, the very heartbeat of God. And it is the hardest thing that you or I will ever do. Now, I'm convinced that's the reason it's the last thing he says. Because this is the climax, this is what it's all about. And I'm convinced that the disciples of Jesus who have made the most impact in human history are people who have chosen this course. And specifically, the people who have chosen this course have ended up with fates similar to Jesus. In our culture, there is one individual who has become an icon. We name streets after this man. We have a day on our calendar to remember this guy. Martin Luther King Jr. And he's become controversial in the past few years for valid reasons. But to be honest with you, I don't think you can talk about enemy love without talking about this guy. This is a quote, two things here. This is a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. outside of his home on January 30th of 1953, 59, something like that. 1956. He was preaching at First Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and it was in the middle of Martin Luther King was just coming to the scene. So if you don't know, Rosa Parks decided she wasn't going to stand up, and it started this Montgomery bus boycott that angered people, very much so angered people. And Martin Luther King became kind of the voice of this movement. He's planned this march, and he was preaching at the First Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He was new to the city at the time, and he's preaching. And around 9:15 p.m. at night, a bomb goes off on his front porch at his home, where his wife and his 7-month-old daughter are at. The bomb goes up, blows up the front porch, shocks the foundation. Thankfully, Coretta and his 7-month-old baby were okay, no harm. As he's preaching, people are telling him that an angry mob is forming. People are leaving the church. They're hearing about this. They're leaving the church, and they're getting their weapons, and they're going to the house like they're going to, like, this is whatever. So Martin Luther King stops the thing. The police officials had already been called and alerted to the scene. Martin Luther King gets there, and he delivers, oh man. He stands there and he says, before I say anything, I want to pray. And he prays and he blesses the people who have done this, and he prays for God's favor on the people that have done this. And then he emphatically told his people to put their guns back away, that they cannot retaliate to violence with violence. And his ability to distill the crowd that night and send them home not retaliating, like there were no fires, there was no cars, like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, it's a testament to this man and his his ability. He writes in his book, Strength to Love, this thought process and why he said what he said that night. He said, the ultimate weakness of violent retaliation is that it is a descending spiral, begatting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence, you can murder the hater, but you cannot murder hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. And so it goes. Returning evil for evil, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. This is a man who had his flaws like we all do. But he is a man who saturated himself in the gospel and the teachings of Jesus. And by the Spirit's grace, those teachings generated a life and a series of life choices that captured our nation's attention. And I mean, here we are, like 70 years later, still talking about this man. Still in awe of a man who at times just simply followed the teachings of Jesus. And so I want us to kind of conclude this section of teachings by realizing and just by sitting in some reflection. And so if you want to do that, you can just kind of put your stuff away and just kind of sit with me for a second as Aaron gets ready to play and we get ready to go eat. What drove Martin Luther King was Jesus himself. And it seems to me that as we are continuing through the book of Matthew, and that the only way we're going to be able to deal with any of the things we've talked about the last several weeks and any of the things we're going to deal with the next several weeks is to look toward Jesus with trust and faith and hope. He lived as the perfect teleos. The teleos, he lived as the teleos human being in my place. He was the human I am called to be but failed to be. And he did it as an act of agape love. And he gave his life as an act of agape love. And in doing so, he turned his enemies into friends. And so the kingdom people of Jesus are not people who are just pretending to be able to do this perfectly. No, we are imperfectly entering into the very heartbeat of God. And we are recognizing that Jesus has already kind of blazed this trail for us and his Spirit dwells in us. And that he lived for us and he gives the Spirit to us. And he forms his love in us. And what we are called to do is trust in his agape love. For us, for our enemy, and to think, like Jesus in agape love gave himself for us. How could we in like manner do that for our enemy? Like, what is something that would be surprising that we could do, counterintuitive that we could do, that would be something we would never think of unless we had encountered the ways of Jesus? What is something that we could do for that person that hates us and that we hate? And then do it. And not do it so that you can put a gospel track in it. Like, just do it. And then see what happens. See what happens in yourself. See what happens in that relationship. And so, I don't want to talk vaguely. Like, get the person in mind. I'm talking about real people here. Someone outside your circle. Someone that you naturally don't move towards with mercy. And as we close, I want to put into practice what Jesus is asking, at least to some degree. We might not be able to agape love them right now instantly. We might not be able to do good to them right now instantly. But what we can do for them is we can pray. And we can lift them up in agape love to Jesus. We can bring that person before the Father who sends sun and rain and ask Jesus to form agape in us so that it might show toward them.